Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, this morning for Lewis, who's out on the West Coast. I'm Sherrod Davis, one of the co-founders and the CEO at EcoMap Technologies. Really excited to welcome you to Ecosystem Talks, where we dive in with ecosystem builders, experts within ecosystems to learn more about their roles and the impact that ecosystems play within them. Joining me today is Lewis Stewart. Lewis is the head of strategic initiatives at Nvidia. Can't wait to dive in more with him on everything ecosystems, his background, which I think a lot of people will find interesting. And so we're really going to be focused on the power of ecosystem building and innovation. Lewis, thanks for joining me, brother. Really appreciate it.
Man, no problem. It's a pleasure. It's been a long time that we've known each other, and it's good to sit down and actually have a conversation. Hopefully, folks enjoy it.
Totally. Why don't we start, Lewis, by letting you introduce yourself and just talking about your current role before we kind of take a step back.
Yeah. So, Louis Stewart, head of strategic initiatives for NVIDIA's developer ecosystem. Been doing this for 3 years, and where the role has evolved into is really looking at how do we. We're going to use the word ecosystem off the bat. How do we build a strategic ecosystem that enables an AI workforce nationally and really globally? Because in order for uh, any country, any company, any community to thrive in this day and age, you have to be AI enabled and you have to be semi AI literate. And it's really going to take all of us, including NVIDIA, to jump into the fray and help folks get there. So I get to work with HBCUs, I get to work with Hispanic serving institutions, indigenous colleges, communities of learning globally, and get them into NVIDIA's ecosystem and teach them some of the tips and tricks and tools that we have.
Love it. And we'll come back to that in a minute, Lewis. But I wanna back up one role. You were formerly the Chief Innovation Officer for the City of Sacramento. Talk about how that role came to be. I know we talked about this a little bit in our prep, but not
Yeah.
every city has a Chief Innovation Officer. So what was the impetus for that role, and what were some of the things that you were working on while there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say this: I got to give a shout out to all the chief innovation officers that are out there. There's a community globally, which is fantastic. All the chief innovation officers do their role a little bit differently. A lot of them are doing really data-based innovation work. But in Sacramento, I was really trying to build an immersive experience-based ecosystem around innovation and entrepreneurship. And to answer your question, that role came about. I got recruited from the state by the city because at the time Sacramento was trying to become the epicenter for um, autonomous cars and setting guidelines for autonomous cars. And that was a big piece of my role as a deputy director of innovation entrepreneurship at the state level. And so we started talking about what it would look like to build an ecosystem here in Sacramento that looked at autonomous cars as innovation, ag tech as innovation, health tech, and so on. And really trying to drive more entrepreneurs to the city, trying to uplift the businesses that were here and look at building this ecosystem in a strategic manner that can actually go communicate with the state capitol, which was 5-10 minutes away from our offices at City Hall. And look how we actually infused innovation in communities so that the communities understood hands-on how to take care of the new technology, what the new technology was all about. So really, it was looking at the ecosystem from a holistic point of view that included policymakers, included community, included educators, and industry. So we tried to build it around the triple helix: industry, academia, and government, all working together to fuel the environment.
So the mayor calls you and says, "Hey, Lewis, come be my chief innovation officer and build this innovation ecosystem around autonomous vehicles, ag tech, et cetera. And you go, okay, where'd you start, Lewis? Like, how'd you
But
start?
that's a fantastic question. I wish it was that straightforward. Um, the it was the mayor's chief deputy that called, and actually she texted, and she was like, "Hey, need you to come do this here." I was working for the state. I was fine, and she's like, "Well, no, no, we need to talk about how this works in Sacramento." And and that's actually how I became the first chief innovation officer in the city. And really, it was because I had an understanding of Sacramento's innovation ecosystem as a whole, what was here, what's not here, what we needed to grow. And so when I first jumped in, I created this framework called the Sacramento Urban Technology Lab. And the framework was really built around that immersive, experience-based innovation, where we looked at all the different sectors that Sacramento and the Sacramento region was good at, and how do we basically turn Sacramento into a test bed. So I started reaching out to the autonomous car makers, and we had a big forum at the Golden One Center. We had state representatives there, we had federal representatives there. Media showed up, autonomous car makers showed up, and we kind of declared ourselves the testing ground for autonomous cars. Uh, we had a lot of work to do because there's a lot of testing that needs to happen to make sure that the roads are mapped properly, that everything is safe, and so on and so forth. So, we got some demonstrations done, but that was really the catalyst for the rest of the conversation, right? From autonomous delivery robots to partnering with incubators and accelerators to have Sacramento be the proving ground for those small companies that were looking to showcase what they had. And it started to garner really national and global attention because what Subtle did, or Sacramento Urban Technology Lab, was put the mayor in the center of the conversation and put the city in the center of the conversation, and it was kind of awesome to see.
You keep mentioning something, Lewis, that stands out to me when describing your work there, and that's immersive and experiential. Why
Yeah,
why were those important tenants for the ecosystem that you were building in Sacramento?
yeah, it's one thing to start with the data, right? But the other part is, if the community around you, the legislators that are in that community, the policymakers, the entrepreneurs, don't understand um, what you're trying to do and what you're trying to build, it's hard for people to jump in and help you build, right? So I pulled together the mayor's innovation council, and we sat down and started really thinking about how do we push these innovative companies and ideas into the neighborhoods, right? So you talk about autonomous cars. We looked at all the different communities that could be positively impacted by autonomous cars, right? So that's children and parents who parents are working, and the kids need a safe way to get home, right? So how do you make sure that the cars are running on routes to safely get the children to their house or their after school programs? But then we also started looking at, okay, what does it mean if we bring this technology into certain corridors and start creating jobs with these technologies, right? So we needed people in the communities to understand what the technology was, so that then they can actually start maybe doing the cybersecurity around their personal community ecosystem. They can actually start servicing and programming the cars and monitoring the cars, so they can actually then start micro ecosystems where they can actually start taking care of the vehicles, right? And taking care of the autonomous food delivery robots, and taking care of the smart street lights, so that they had a two-way conversation with the city, two-way conversation with the police, and two-way conversation with whoever else was in that ecosystem to make it work right. And then again, in partnership with the university, making sure that the students that were graduating out of the university understood what we were bringing, so that they would be inspired to actually stay in Sacramento. So we didn't have a talent drain. But then also think about how do they build what they want to build in the city. And so that's why it had to be immersive, and that's why it had to be experiential, where we actually brought autonomous buses to Sac State. We actually brought autonomous cars and did routes in neighborhoods and underserved neighborhoods, so that people could actually sit in the cars and ride and understand, you know, that the fears of iRobot, maybe a little bit, but the reality is, now they're sitting in the car and they got from point A to point B, and they lived, and now let's figure out what's next, right? Let's get them excited about the future, and then you can actually start gathering data, in my opinion, because now you have people that have experienced it. And you have proof points of how long it took to get policies on the road. Now you have all that stuff versus starting from the theoretical, where sometimes you got to make some stuff up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like, Lewis, you really had a bias towards action in that role, which I think is important to call out because ecosystem building can be theoretical, right? But it looks like you just started moving and sort of let the results be what they are, and then you can make edits. Lewis, tell me, what was the most challenging part of that work of building that specific ecosystem with a focus on autonomous vehicles, and you're working for the city? What was the most challenging part?
I would say I would say it's kind of two things. One, um, policymakers not understanding the language of innovation, conflating ecosystems with something else that they might hear in business, um, and trying to distill what a chief innovation officer does in Sacramento. It's the capital, the fifth largest economy in the world. So action kind of had to be it, because you saw all this innovation happening in other places and you wanted to make sure that Sacramento didn't get left behind, right? So there wasn't a long time to sit and have very deliberate conversations with legislators. You just kind of had to jump in to policy discussions. You had to jump in and explain how you go from the ethereal innovation cotton candy type thing to turning it into a solid Jolly Rancher for folks, and something that they can actually bite on and got sticky, and had to help people do that, and that was challenging. It was challenging to get buy-in from the business community here, because there had been promises of stuff before, and I needed to be able to deliver on those things. And so it was important to kind of get the business community behind our efforts. And really, the last part was just getting uh, getting colleagues within the city to understand that they had a big part of what was coming and what needed to happen, versus being threatened by what I was doing on behalf of the city, right? And getting folks to understand that this was not initiatives for Lewis, this was initiatives for the city. And so I think those three things were kind of the biggest challenges. The universities were fairly easy. Actually, the community was very open once you actually sat down and had just conversations with them about where you were going, and you helped paint a picture for them. But yeah, those three things were probably the big challenges that I had.
Talk, Lewis, about how you ended up at Nvidia, right? You go from the city of Sacramento
Yeah,
to
yeah.
working at one of the largest, fastest growing tech companies around. How'd you get there? What's that transition been like?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Sherrod, that the Nvidia story is really kind of the story of almost all my jobs since I've been an adult. So it I'm sitting at home during the pandemic, kind of minding my business, right? Just trying to figure out what a chief innovation officer does during a pandemic. How do you help your city and the economy for the city, right? And because there's no tourists. There's no tax revenue coming. There's nothing driving the city, right? But everybody's in need. So we had just launched the Wi-Fi bus program along with the state to help children learn, and we partnered with RT, the local bus system, and some telecom providers, and put Wi-Fi buses in 20 neighborhoods around the city. And I'm like, okay, well, what's next? And one evening, I got a message on LinkedIn, and it said, "Can we talk?" And no, it's 6:30 at night, and I'm about to go eat dinner. So I was like, "Yeah, here's my Calendly. Just hit me up." The next message was fairly immediate. I only need 5 minutes, and so I'm like, "Okay, yeah, cool. Here's my number." And a gentleman by the name of Ned Finkel, who I had connected with when I was at the state, and I was doing roundtables around autonomous cars back in 2012, was on the other end. And he said, "Look, um, we've been watching your progress. We like what you're doing. And in this time, uh, which was right after the George Floyd killing, we need your type of leadership at Nvidia. Um, we think that there's a role for you here, and we want to give you the opportunity to continue doing your life's work," which was crazy impactful for that last part, because where I've moved in my career is in the service of others. Whether any role that I've been in, it's important to make sure that the generations that come after me have access and opportunities to do the stuff that I have done and see the stuff that I've seen. So for Ned to say that was it resonated a lot. And um, he asked if I could would give him permission to throw my name in the hat for a bunch of hires that they were bringing into Nvidia. And I said, of course. It didn't take me too long to say yeah. I was like, yeah. I had actually applied there in 2018 and got rejected. So the fact that it came back around was fantastic. So the 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 craziest part about the transition, Sherrod, is I thought I was moving fast, right, at the state and city level. When I got to NVIDIA, with pivots every 3 to 6 months, with speed of light messaging, NVIDIA moves fast. And so learning how to let go of my government speak and move back into plain talk and truly action oriented speaking was has been the hardest transition, right? But and learning how to pivot every 3 to 6 months, which I had been doing in my prior roles because it was necessary to keep up with industry, but actually pivoting is is um, is a challenge, and it's a cadence that you have to get used to. And the other part is actually being part of a team, and a company that thrives on community, that thrives on team. Um, and at first, it was actually hard to believe that everybody was super supportive because that hadn't been my experience over the years. Um, but when you walk into a place and everybody's cheering you on and encouraged to see the ecosystem that you are building, in service of others, but also in service of the company, right? Is transformational for what it can do for your mental health and just your performance.
How have you seen your definition of an ecosystem evolve, going from the state to the city to now at Nvidia? Like, what's that been like as you think about what an ecosystem is?
Yeah, so it's interesting because at the state is where I kind of cut my teeth in the ecosystem space, right? And started to understand the triple helix, and started to understand the need for buy-in, and started to understand how money flows through the system from federal, state to local. into communities. And so at the state, it was about growing the ecosystem, talking to as many people as you can talk to, get them under your umbrella. At the state, it was focused on bringing people to the state. And then all of a sudden at the city, that thought process condensed. So how do I bring what I learned at the state and international level to a city level, right? So you can actually do stuff in practice versus spreading it across the whole state and you don't ever see it, right? The concept was still the same because we had all the elements. We had the government, local and state. We had industry, thriving businesses here. And we had two academic institutions, two universities, and then the community colleges here. So you had still the same the same ecosystem in general, but now you can actually implement it, right? And so every stage was a learning thing for me, but the framework stayed the same, right? And so now at Nvidia, it expands back out because Nvidia is a global company, and you when you're charged with workforce enablement and skill enablement at a global level, now you're back looking at a broader ecosystem. Who do you partner with? You partner with universities. You have to bring in corporate partners. You have to bring in uh, career-minded organizations that have a captured audience, so that you can help them upskill themselves or reskill themselves so they can actually get out into the workforce. So the framework is still the same for me, but the breadth and depth of the ecosystems have evolved over the years. Right, super concentrated in SAC, but now at Nvidia, now you put stuff in practice globally.
Really interesting. The concept of an ecosystem contracting, expanding based on what you're working on, I think is fascinating. Um, we've talked about this, Lewis, pivoting a little bit. We know the federal government have made a ton of investment into AI and workforce. And I know your work at NVIDIA is deeply focused on ensuring that we have the right folks to bridge the gap, so to speak. Can you just talk a little bit more about that and your philosophy there, what you're seeing, and also how at your role in NVIDIA intends to address it?
Yeah. So, yeah, the federal government has done a surprisingly hard pivot towards workforce enablement and AI skill development, to make sure that we don't have uh, a fractured workforce supply chain, right? Because we all ran into supply chain problems and experienced it during the pandemic. Um, so that's hardware, software, not so much, but definitely you realize that you need people to drive an economy, to drive ecosystems and help them stay alive. Um, and just strategically, you need to make these investments. So it's been fantastic to see the federal government jump in. Here at NVIDIA, what that looks like is Jensen, our CEO, is really trying to figure out what what can we do to help the federal government, help state governments in those innovation ecosystem conversations, in those workforce enablement conversations, and really how do we help states with their economic growth strategies, right? And so we have a federal team that's it's basically living in DC these days, to have a better understanding, because it is a fast moving policy space for AI. And then we have kind of the rest of the team within NVIDIA that rallies around these efforts so that we can actually go talk to universities and hopefully embed some of our subject matter experts, uh, especially at HBCUs and community colleges, to help the students that are learning there understand in practice what it means to be a software engineer, to be a computer vision engineer. How do you how do you um, how do you truly become a tech sales professional in the AI space? And we have significant experience in all of those. And we have a tremendous sense of volunteerism. So I'm grateful to my colleagues at NVIDIA for always circling the wagons and jumping into these conversations wherever they're located, because it it is going to take everybody to continue to fuel the innovation that's happening in the U.S., to continue to fuel the innovation that's happening in the EU and beyond, right? You can't leave people out. You can't look at underserved communities and not think that you don't have to upskill them in order to be part of this larger, broader AI ecosystem. And so, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to play a small role in that, and talk to folks like you about what it actually takes to build these environments for people to hopefully thrive in.
Why is it important to focus on engaging HBCUs, HSIs, and community colleges in this work? Like, why has Nvidia decided to point Lewis Stewart in that direction to make it so on and
Yeah,
so?
yeah. No, yeah. I mean, look, those aren't HBCUs have not been a traditional focus of tech companies. You saw a lot of donations happening, especially during the pandemic after George Floyd. Um, but there's always this notion that the the quality of talent that's coming out of HBCUs isn't at the level that you need. So you end up having tech companies in general fishing from all the same ponds. They go to the Stanfords, the MITs, the Berkeleys, the you name it. People know the schools, right? Um, but it's not until you go start talking to North Carolina A&T, which is the largest HBCU and produces the most Black engineers in the country, that you figure out that there's a thriving ecosystem uh, within the HBCU community where all the professors are connected, they're competing against each other, and they want to have partnerships with industry and with folks like NVIDIA so that their students can graduate and have the same talent and exposure that you get at the Stanfords and Berkeley's and Georgia Tech's, and have the same ability to compete for jobs and create startups. So it's important to make sure that, like I said, that everybody has that access and opportunity. So working with HBCUs, HSIs, indigenous colleges, community colleges is crucial because you have populations that are coming in um, first time in college or reskilling or upskilling or transition jobs or whatever that aren't hitting necessarily the major universities. And they need the same kind of exposure. They want the same kind of exposure. And so a lot of times, without a true connection, a true relationship with industry, uh, you get you may not get maximum exposure. You get theoretical exposure to the technologies. So it's crucial, and again, my life's work to go into my community, if you will, and make sure that my community has exposure to what it is that now I have access to. And it's part of my passion as I've got to where I am in my career.
I hear all the time how industry needs to work better with academia, academia needs to work better with industry. And those challenges, I think, run even deeper when you're talking specifically about HBCUs, HSIs, et cetera. What have you learned, Lewis, about now sitting on this side of the aisle, industry, working with those types of organizations? What's worked, what hasn't? Recommendations for a playbook framework as people try to
Yeah.
deepen the relationships that they might have with those types of organizations.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is you need internal champions at those institutions, and that's at all levels. Right? So you need internal champions at the president and chancellor's office. You need champions at the provost office. You need champions that are professors, and you need champions that are the students, because a lot of times the students are the driving change behind curriculum. And so if a company simply goes in at the professor level and expects change there, that's hard. Because professors have incredible course loads. Oftentimes are doing their own research. So pivoting curriculum isn't the easiest thing to do, right? And so in order to drive true change, um, and to all my colleagues out there that are in uh, development offices and advancement offices, don't take this the wrong way, but a lot of times that may not be the best place for an industry partner to end up, uh, because some industry partners really want to develop relationships with the university that are long lasting and really can change the educational outcome of your students. And with a company like Nvidia, where the sense of volunteerism is huge, it's building generational relationship with an institution is probably easier to do than if we uh, just opened up a checkbook and said, "Here, we're going to build this." And you never really know where those relationships can go if you're in it for a relationship. Uh, and that's what NVIDIA has allowed me to do, is actually go foster these relationships. And so, having conversations with presidents of universities, having conversations with chancellors at community colleges, so that they can help institute the change that's needed. In a multidisciplinary way, because it's not just about engineering. We have to talk to the business school. We have to talk to the civics teams. We have to talk to the ethics folks. Bias has to be a consideration in all conversations. And so you need the technical and non-technical to truly impact how artificial intelligence evolves in the future. And a lot of times that's not done through the advancement or development office.
That's really interesting. I think one of the things that you said that stood out to me is building a champion within those organizations. How have you been able to do that? What's been challenging about it? Because I
Right.
think you're right. Like finding a few champions can oftentimes be the catalyst to a really fruitful partnership and relationship, but it's sometimes easier said than done, I think.
Yeah. So the best thing for me, being a team of one, is when the champion stands up and raises their hand and says, "Hey, talk to me. Let's get this done." Fantastic. More recently, the champions have actually come from internal at NVIDIA that are alum from HBCUs. And they're like, "Hey, we know such and such. I want to see the students at my alma mater have access to the things and programs that you're doing, Lewis." And I'm like, "All right, well, let's go talk to your alma mater." And they start enabling those conversations within their schools that catalyze more fruitful conversations. And then the last part is actually we've been on a path to develop corporate alliances with workforce enablers that are connected to different communities of learning here in the U.S. And so they're connected to universities, they're connected to their own community of learning, they're connected to state government, and so they end up driving a lot of relationships because they want to create an opportunity for the communities that they serve. And so they then champion a bigger, broader relationship. And we gladly explore what that looks like. Doesn't always work out, but it does provide more exposure to those communities, and hopefully it's impactful and inspires folks to jump in.
Having sat on two sides of sort of the ecosystem spectrum, state and city, public in the government, and now on the private side. From what you've seen, how can ecosystem builders working for state or local government work better with industry? And then how can industry work better with ecosystem builders, potentially at the state or city level?
Yeah, so I'll start with the industry side. The so from if I put my government hat back on, right? Because I still dabble in that world. It's important for industry to understand that yes, government are policymakers, but it's crucial to be able to sit down with those policymakers and help them understand how they evolve their internal workforce. So, state, federal IT professionals, and the like, um, for continuous advancement of the government and their systems. Um, it's important to sit down with government and help understand how policies can impact uh, economic outcomes, economic development outcomes, innovation, ecosystem outcomes, workforce enablement outcomes, and because without having those conversations from industry, which obviously sits on a different leg of the economic development stool, it's hard. It's hard for government to truly realize the potential impact of legislation. You know, from but now put my industry hat on, looking at university, and so government. If so, now I'm on the industry side. Industry, in theory, is where all the money is. It's important for government to shield and provide the environment for innovation to thrive, create policies that don't cut off innovation ecosystems. And so government has to listen to industry when they come in and not have knee-jerk reactions. It needs to be a relationship because there's a lot of learning that has to happen. And a lot of times for industry to jump in, they have to see good signals from the government that the government understands and is trying to do stuff, like with what the feds are doing with the Chips and Science Act. There's a lot of programs underneath that that are for experiential learning and research and so on and so forth. So making sure that you're at least at the table for those conversations, which means interacting with government and not just going fast and breaking stuff, right? And then at the university side, because now I've been able to work with universities from the government and industry side, and just be open, right? Be open to conversations, be open to change. I know change is hard um, at the university level and the community college level. Community college is a little bit more nimble, but it is crucial for the future of your students to be in conversations that involve government and industry. Uh, if you're an engineering student, make sure that you're going out and doing some sales. If you're in sales, make sure you go try to understand some of the technology. People need to understand marketing as a whole so they can understand how to communicate. And those are the things that industry needs. And with that experience, you can impact how government actually works if you choose to go that route. So all of it is inextricably linked. But a lot of times people just have one view, and that's kind of where they stay.
Got it. And when you think about what success looks like relative to ecosystem building at Nvidia in your role, like what does that look like? Like paint that picture.
I'm still painting. I think I have the base coat down right now, Sherrod. But
And
I
a
think
part of it, I'm sorry to cut
yeah,
you off.
no,
I think a
yeah,
part of the reason I ask is the perception is likely that Nvidia, there's not a shortage of resources at Nvidia, right?
right,
So
right.
as I mentioned, one of the biggest, fastest growing technology companies, you would think that financial resources would not necessarily be a barrier, but there must be others. So where
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to go is paint the picture for what success looks
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
What are the things that are standing in the way currently?
Yeah, so one of the things that's actually standing in the way is the popular belief of what you just said about the financial piece about Nvidia. But what folks need to understand about our company is the company, even though it's 30 years old, still is in startup mode and is continually reinvesting in the company, in particular in research and finding top talent. So there is not as much access to those kind of resources as people may think, which is why part of my big picture for what this looks like is building long-lasting relationships across the U.S., across the globe, with universities, with educators, with students, in a way that we can positively impact outcomes, right? So since we have a relationship, now we can actually track and trace, how students are moving through the system because we built a possibly a mentor relationship with the students. Um, just getting emails today from an email I sent out to some of my professor colleagues out there that they've changed schools. So now we're starting to develop a cadence where we can continue our conversations even though they're not at their prior academic institution. Um, and so success for me means that the ecosystem continues to grow because now even if they're at a new institution, now they're opening the opportunities up to a new set of students, a new university, and it just kind of continues to go from there, right? And ultimately, what I'm hoping to be able to see as success is more minorities employed in the AI field, whether that's in business and marketing and sales and engineering, whatever. I need to see an impact from the work that I'm doing. I need to see that we've set up programs alongside of our corporate partners that are driving the innovation ecosystem. So we see more minority innovation startups coming through accelerator programs that are AI based or using some sort of AI. And all that stuff is trackable. So in 5 years, I want to be able to say that I've been able to influence the education and learning of over 500,000 people in the U.S. I want to be able to say that I've helped upskill, you know, X number of professors across the globe and bring them into a program like our ambassador program. Um, I want to be able to see uh, that I have made a measurable impact. Right? Because for me, success is really all about helping other people be successful. Uh, and if I can see the success coming out of the community that I'm serving now, then I have a more fully painted picture of success.
Love it. Love it. What really quickly before we go to the audience questions, where are you seeing the biggest opportunity within AI for these institutions or for these communities, right? Is it we talked a little bit about chips. We talked about sort of the support that's needed around these types of companies, just from where you sit. And as there are, folks building community and ecosystems on the call, like where do you see the biggest opportunity or point of leverage where someone might be able to dive in and really make an impact
Mhm.
for a company, for their community, or ultimately for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, look, um, uh, I, I hesitate to put this out there, but it's a real thing. I think you may have heard me say this: no connection is a bad connection, and so if the biggest opportunity is the connectivity of the ecosystem, right? If you can figure out how the puzzle pieces can fit together to serve your customer, whether that be your family, that be your CEO, a coworker, whatever, you have the opportunity to provide impact. So connecting with you, connecting with me, connecting with and just talking to folks and understanding how to meet people where they are see if they're even interested in moving from beyond being a consumer to actually being a practitioner in the space. Whether that means starting a startup, whether that actually means becoming a data scientist, whatever that looks like, right? Is pay it forward and figure out who you can connect them to so that they can actually have the ability to take a step up in their life and affect change for the generations beyond them.
Love it. All right, we're gonna move to questions from our attendees. We have one from Flavio who asks, what are the roles of economic development organizations slash NGOs? I think
Yes,
you
yes.
can be specific or broad, but I think
Yeah,
in
yeah.
general, just around ecosystem building.
Yeah, look, so economic development organizations are where I absolutely cut my teeth, did economic development for the state under two governors, and I was housed in the economic development group for the city of Sacramento. And economic development groups are crucial um, in this whole fabric because a lot of times they are the brokers of information uh, for startups moving into an area. They are the connectivity to the future workforce. So economic development orgs have to be open to change at the most fundamental level, because even though you're embedded in government, um, you need to be able to be as agile as possible in helping um, the machine understand that the change that's coming and help facilitate policies that are enabling economic growth and workforce enablement in the communities that the economic development organization serves. Yes, you have to focus on housing. Yes, you have to focus on stuff that actually that actually drives the city from a foundational level. But if you don't have a thriving economy, you don't have burgeoning ecosystem, startups, food scene, um, just people moving around your city. Yeah, it's rough to do economic development. You become a sleepy town.
Other questions from the audience? Any final words? Any final thoughts, Lewis?
Look, one, I want to thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation with you. I hope that our conversation has inspired some thinking about ecosystem building out there. And I'll just say, um, connection is key. Hit me up on LinkedIn if you have questions or want to connect into to what I'm doing, because my ecosystem now can be a whole lot broader than it has been in the past. And you know, I would love just to be able to see the ecosystems builders out there um, working with ecomap technologies or working with other industry folks to see how communities can thrive and how they're growing and how they're developing, um, because that's ultimately what it's about, is serving the community, making things accessible for everybody that wants to jump in.
Thanks, Lewis. Really appreciative of your time.
Yeah,
Uh,
man.
Amazing conversation and insight. Well, that'll do it for today. So we'll let you get back to it. We'll give you a few minutes back, Lewis. But thanks again, man.
Thank you, kind sir. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.